Okay, picture this. You're stepping into a courtroom and your entire future is hanging in the balance. You'd absolutely hope that the judge looking down at you is perfectly objective, right? Just weighing the cold, hard facts. Well, human biology is incredibly stubborn. There's this fascinating study of Israeli parole boards, and researchers found something wild. Right after the judges had a food break, a prisoner's chance of getting a favorable parole ruling was about 65%. But as the day wore on and hunger started creeping in, that percentage steadily dropped. Actually, it plummeted to nearly zero right before the next meal break. Take a second to really think about that. Exact same case facts, but drastically different outcomes, driven literally by whether or not the judge had recently eaten a sandwich. It's called the hungry judge effect, and it highlights a deeply unsettling reality about how we humans make judgments.
So if human judges are ruled by their stomachs or how tired they are and a whole host of unconscious biases, it raises a massive modern question. Can artificial intelligence step in and serve as the ultimate perfectly objective judge? I mean, if we replace the human mind with a machine, do we finally achieve truly blind justice? Or do we just, upload our own flaws straight into the cloud? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our investigative journalist hats to uncover the truth about human and machine logic. We're diving into an absolutely fascinating new research paper that literally puts 5 heavyweight large language models on trial. The goal? To see exactly how they handle the same cognitive biases that plague human juries and judges. And what we found? Well, it turns out our technology often just holds up a flawed mirror to our own psychology. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Flawed Human Justice. Before we put the AI on the stand, we need to understand the baseline problem here.
Okay, let's dive into this. To understand human judgment, we have to look at how our brains process information. Basically, our brains are always looking for shortcuts to make sense of a really complex world. Back in 1920, psychologist E.L. Thorndike published a paper documenting a powerful perception error. He called it the halo effect. He found that if you notice someone possesses one highly desirable trait, your brain unconsciously just assumes they have a bunch of other desirable traits too. It's like our minds want to avoid the hard work of reconciling conflicting info, so we just slap an angelic halo on the person and call it a day.
Thorndike's original concept beautifully illustrates how this plays out in real life. You see this all the time with physical attractiveness. Research repeatedly shows that if someone is physically beautiful, we automatically assume they're also socially competent, intellectually competent, and well-adjusted. In fact, empirical studies show that more attractive defendants routinely receive lighter sentences in criminal cases. The halo shines so brightly it literally blinds the jury to the facts.
But there's a dark side to this too. It's known as the horn effect, or sometimes the devil effect. This happens when an initial negative perception creates this persistent dark cloud over someone. Think about a workplace scenario. Say an employee is consistently late, maybe because they're juggling childcare in the mornings. A manager under the horn effect will automatically assume this person is also lazy, negligent, or just uncommitted to their work. One perceived flaw suddenly paints their entire character in a completely negative light.
And hey, it's not just about judging people. These biases are everywhere in our everyday consumer lives. Have you ever heard of the health halo? Studies show that dieters significantly underestimate the calories in food if the packaging just says healthy or organic. In one study, this halo was even slapped onto organic Oreo cookies. Dieters actually thought they were fine to eat every single day, completely glossing over the fact that, organic or not, it's a sugary cookie. The label creates a halo that completely overrides common sense.
So, let's take these everyday mental shortcuts back into the courtroom, right where they crash into our deep human desire for justice. This brings us to a really crucial bias called the virtuous victim effect, or VVE. It's the documented psychological tendency to view people who have been victimized as inherently more moral than otherwise identical non-victors. Basically, our brains hypothesize that if we elevate a victim's moral character, it motivates society to help them and punish the bad guys.
But human psychology is messy, and here's where it gets incredibly unfair. The virtuous victim effect drops off a cliff when human judges encounter what researchers call adjacent consent. In scenarios like sexual assault, if there is information that implies prior consensual interactions or intimacy, human judges and juries actually tend to assign more blame to the victim. They artificially reduce the victim's moral elevation. And this happens even though the ultimate harm and the crime committed are entirely identical. It is a deeply, deeply flawed human heuristic.
Section 2. Can AI do better? So, knowing all this, the hungry judge, the halo effect, the virtuous victim bias, can large language models eliminate these deeply ingrained human biases? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the research methodology. How do you actually test this? To see if AI behaves like us, researchers designed specific legal vignettes, pulled from psychological literature. But here's the clever part. They altered names and context so the AI couldn't just spit out memorized answers from its training data. They kept all the facts of a case identical and changed only one single variable, like a defendant's job or a victim's prior consent, just to see if the AI's judgment would shift.
And they didn't just test one model, they brought in the heavyweights. We're talking ChatGPT-5 Instant, ChatGPT-5 Thinking, DeepSeek v3.1, Claude Sonnet 4, and Gemini 2.5 Flash. Each model went through independent multi-run trials to isolate these psychological manipulations and really measure the differences in how they handed down sentences and moral judgments.
Section 3. The verdict on AI bias. So, what's the verdict? Did testing the AI hold up a flawed mirror to our own psychology?
Well, let's start with the virtuous victim effect. Get this. The research discovered that AI models actually showed a higher pro-victim bias than humans. They amplified the VVE, rating victims with even higher moral character scores than human benchmarks. But in a massive win for fairness, none of the AI models penalized victims for giving prior adjacent consent. Unlike us humans, the machines looked at the identical harm and judged it consistently. They completely ignored that adjacent consent heuristic that so often derails human juries.
And this brilliantly illustrates how these biases play out with corporations. The researchers fed the AI a real-world employment discrimination case. The only thing they changed was whether the defendant was an ordinary company or a highly prestigious one. And sure enough, just like humans, the AI showed a clear corporate halo effect, penalizing the prestigious company way more. For instance, ChatGPT-5 Instant handed down a $12.5 million payout against the ordinary company. But the second the company was framed as prestigious, it nearly doubled the penalty to $24.8 million.
So the crucial point is right here in the raw data. When you look at how they perform side by side, it's clear they have their own unique measurable biases. Across the board, every model exhibited a halo effect. Now, it was generally slightly weaker than in humans, giving us about a 25% bias reduction on average. But the thing that's actually kind of alarming is the vast difference between the models themselves.
Because the most shocking finding wasn't just that the bias existed, but the profound lack of consistency. In that corporate compensation case, Gemini 2.5 Flash produced civil damage awards that swung wildly. I'm talking anywhere from $20 million all the way up to $325 million. That kind of volatility is completely unworkable for any system meant to assist in judicial decisions. Overall, the study found Gemini 2.5 Flash performed the worst, while ChatGPT-5 Instant was actually the most consistent and fairest judge of the bunch.
But hey, it is not all bad news. There is a really bright spot here regarding credential prestige. So, in human studies, if an expert witness in a capital case comes from a moderate prestige state school rather than an Ivy League university, human jurors routinely hand out harsher death penalty ratings. It's terrible. The AI models, though, they showed a substantial reduction in this bias. They were way less swayed by the prestige of, say, a Yale degree versus an Ohio State degree. That made their sentencing recommendations far more impartial on this metric than humans. Let's move to how this builds to a pretty stark conclusion by the researchers. While AI can definitely help mitigate some biases like credential prestige, its amplified pro-victim stance brings entirely new risks to the table. The researchers warn about something called compassion fade, where excessive emotional framing basically leads to disengagement. If AI constantly boils people down into one-dimensional innocent victims, it oversimplifies complex realities, and ironically, that undermines the very justice it's supposed to support. At the end of the day, we build AI by feeding it the totality of human text. That's our history, our judgments, and yes, our deepest prejudices. As we've seen throughout this explainer, these models might sidestep some of our flaws, but often they just repackage them. So the question we have to leave you with is this. As we continue integrating large language models into the highest stakes areas of society, will artificial intelligence ever truly outgrow the human flaws hidden within its training data, or is the machine always going to be a reflection of the minds that made it? Thanks for joining us for this explainer. Keep questioning the logic, both human and artificial.